Well, happy Friday, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com with your weekly roundup. Today is March 3rd, 2023. We'll be covering some stories you may have missed. Let's jump in. First article I want to talk about is from Complete Colorado, page 2, original reporting and commentary. March 2nd, 2023, by Sherry Pife. Multiple income tax cutting ballot measures already filed for Colorado's 2024 election. Now, I'm pretty excited about this. I think there's a great opportunity here for liberty activists, for people who believe in a strong economy, and anyone who wants to see the state deprived of more of their money, more of our money, to support this ballot measure. Let's look at the article. Denver, fresh off the heels of a voter pass reduction in the state income tax, the proponents of Proposition 121, the 2022 ballot measure that lowered Colorado's flat income tax rate from 4.55% to 4.4%, are at it again. John Caldera, president of the Independence Institute, a free market think tank in Denver, is continuing what he has dubbed a Path to Zero plan to eventually eliminate Colorado's income tax by filing two more initiatives for the 2024 election to lower the income tax rate yet again. One option filed would take the rate to 4.35%, effective for tax years beginning January 1st, 2025. The other would take that down even further to 4.25%, also effective for tax years beginning January 1st, 2025. Caldera said he and his co-proponent, Ben Murray, the director of fiscal policy for the Independence Institute, would decide later which option they believe is the best route. Caldera added this is about helping Coloradans understand the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and what it really means. All this does is cut into our refunds, Caldera said. This is just another way of refunding our surpluses. So check that out. Of course, in 2022 and 2020, uh, Caldera's efforts did get our income tax lowered marginally, of course, but hey, it's a huge win for Colorado taxpayers who are keeping more money in their wallets and a huge loss for the state government who has less money to use against us. Let's move on. SummitDaily.com, February 23rd, 2023, originally a Joe Mueller article in the center square. Colorado expected to generate $815 million in hotel taxes, up 16.7% since pre-pandemic. State and local tax revenue generated by Colorado hotels will increase 16.7% in 2023 compared to 2019 collections, according to estimates by the American Hotel and Lodging Association. So that's great news. If true, if this continues, it's great to see that there are tourism increasing. You know, people coming to Colorado, spending their money, and helping our local businesses and our local employers benefit. What's interesting too, there is an issue with employing staffing. Of course, the 2023 nationwide projected staffing level is 11% lower than the 2019, according to the report. The association reported that more than 100,000 jobs are currently open throughout the nation's hotels. So in Colorado, the 2023 projected hotel staffing level will be approximately 11% below 2019 levels. Washington, D.C. is projected to have the largest staffing decline at 19.2%. So interesting, as Colorado becomes so unaffordable for so many people are moving out. Of course, a shortage of workers, but great to see that the tourism industry is expected to kind of bounce up a little bit. It's good news. Let's moving on to some bad news. Hate to ruin your Friday morning with this, but you've probably already seen the headline. Here's how Democrats want to change Colorado's gun laws. CPR.org, February 23rd, 2023. So from last week, but important to cover. Gosh, these people in this photo are absolutely miserable and should not be elected to office at any time in the future. So the slate of bills that the Democratic legislative leadership is pushing on Colorado gun owners is to A, institute a 3-day waiting period for all gun purchases, B, raise the age of purchase and possess firearms to 21, C, add district attorneys, educators, healthcare providers, and licensed mental health professionals to the list of people who can file an extreme risk protection order, aka red flag gun confiscation, and D, make it easier to sue firearm manufacturers for liability. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So it's already been reported that this waiting period for gun purchases is constitutional or does have a constitutional issue, as you can expect. I'm sure all of these do, but pretty ridiculous to say, hey, somebody who wants to buy a firearm has to wait a couple days in order to get their rights, in order to use their rights. Absolutely stupid and ridiculous. We're adults. We're not prisoners. We're people in a free society here. We should be able to buy a firearm whenever we see fit. course, increase the age to purchase or possess a firearm to 21. Of course, these are the same legislators who want to see 18-year-olds, maybe even 16-year-olds vote. Hey, if you're not an adult at 18, if you can't own a firearm at 18, if you can't drink at 18 or buy cigarettes, then why should you be able to vote, is kind of my thought. Not that I support that, of course. I think if you're 18-year-old, you're an adult, you're an adult. You should be able to do whatever you want at that point, including own a firearm. So absolutely, absolutely going after going after the rights of 18 to 20-year-olds. Think of a 18 or a 19-year-old young woman who's maybe moved out of the house for the first time, living in crime-ridden Denver, and you're telling her she can't legally have a firearm to defend herself. I mean, absolutely not, really ridiculous. What an insult to 18 to 20-year-olds. Who's standing up for them? Expand, got red flag gun confiscation. Of course, pretty dumb to think that having district attorneys, I mean, these politically charged people who would take every gun they could from people, give them the ability to initiate red flag gun confiscation. Educators, come on, we've seen educators over the last couple of years in Colorado. Many of them aren't mentally stable themselves. Healthcare providers, licensed mental health professionals, including marriage and addiction counselors, psychologists, and social workers. I mean, come on, they just want to make it easier for people to take guns away from law-abiding citizens and to have all of this category of people. These are the people who are restricted our rights during the whole COVID regime. To give them the ability to take our guns away is very, very wrong. And of course, the new civil liability risk for gun industry. What these people want to do, what these anti-gun legislators in Denver want to do, is, of course, allow lawsuits against gun manufacturers. So stupid, so idiotic. And their goal, as you can see, I mean, this really reveals their goal. It's not about gun safety, it's about shutting down the gun industry. It's about shifting our culture away from gun ownership into a victim state. That's what they want to do. Make no mistake about it, these anti gun legislators want to disarm us if they could. These are steps along their path. Let's move on. Talk to you about an article I wrote this week, published yesterday, March 2nd, 2023. Advance steps to defend your gun rights. 3 more steps. So this is a follow-up to a February 1st article I had, some basic steps to become a model gun owner, grow your community and join organized efforts. I thought those were important kind of steps for people who are just getting into gun culture, gun rights activism. Well, this is a little bit more advanced. This requires a lot of time, a lot of energy, but I think for those worth putting in that time and energy, and people who have money, these could be some potentially beneficial activities to do to speak out and stand up to defend our Second Amendment rights. So become an influential pro-gun voice. Hey, create a website, create a podcast, create a YouTube channel, create a newsletter, get on the radio, host an event, help host a Tea Party group, help host a Liberty on the Rocks group. There's a lot you can do to become an influential pro-gun voice in your community. It does take some work, but it's one of the most rewarding things out there, and it's really the best way to get organized in order to have an organized effort to fight back against these tyrants who want to deprive us of our rights. So if you're interested in that, check out that step, become an influential pro-gun voice. Go into that, come up with some strategy for pro-gun media in the article. And then step number 2, make your county a Second Amendment sanctuary. As you can see, all of those politicians who are pushing that gun restrictions are Denver politicians. Of course, Boulder's in there, but it's all Denver metro politicians who are trying to deprive us of our rights. These aren't rural Colorado politicians. They don't represent most of the state. They represent a very small area in the inner city. So it doesn't make sense what they're trying to do to affect everybody who lives out in the country, out in the mountains, out in any community. So I think one of the biggest things a person could do, make your county a Second Amendment sanctuary, especially if it's a rural county. You got a lot of gun owners there. It's a little more effort than what people might think, because there have been 39 Colorado counties, 3 cities, 4 towns who have adopted some pro Second Amendment resolutions. However, they really need to take it a step further and kind of become a little more strong language in terms of what they're willing to allow happen in their county. So I put together these list of questions with some help from Michael Bolden of the 10th Amendment Center. You can answer these questions, and you have a possibility of getting your county to enact strong Second Amendment sanctuary language. Please email me. You'll see the email in the article. Step number 3, of course, recall anti-gun legislators and run pro-gun candidates. So in 2013, Colorado gun owners made history by recalling 2 state senators and forcing the resignation of a third. So this was in response to this really heinous gun control that was passed at the time. And 10 years later, here we are back at it. So, recalls are possible. It's a little bit harder than it was back then. There's more signature requirements. Secretary of State says you need 25% of the voters in the last election. The signature threshold to place a recall question on the ballot for a state or county elected official is 25% of the total votes cast at the last preceding general election for that office. Now, I think there's some seats that if you got a recall election, if you're able to get the signatures and get a good candidate and get some good marketing and get some volunteers. I mean, like I said, takes a lot of work. These are advanced steps. But I think there's, a couple Senate districts that if they're flipped, they're going to stay Republican for a while. And same with some of these House districts. These are the closest House districts in 2022. If you're able to flip those now, before 2024, it could make a huge impact for the efforts going into the 2024 election. So, of course, supporting pro-gun candidates. Like I was saying earlier, 2024, it's a year away, but right now we got to be focused on that election if we want to restore some liberty to our state. And then put some talking points together for some pro-gun candidates or pro-gun talking points for people running for office or doing some marketing for candidates. So check that out if you're interested. freestatecolorado.com, trying to become a resource here for the liberty movement in Colorado. Let's move on. I wanted to share this article because I think it's very important for Colorado Springs to differentiate themselves from Denver. And I think that Colorado Springs can really become the second capital of Colorado. And of course, it is in many ways already, but it can really provide that distinction between what more liberty or conservative leadership in the state, in the city government can do, as opposed to the total clown show that's happening in Denver. So this is a good indication of Colorado Springs doing things a little bit better than Denver. From CPR News, CPRorg.com, Dan Boyce, February 24th, 2023. Colorado Springs crime has fallen since 2010, even as total crime in the state is up a lot. A new report from the Colorado-based nonpartisan conservative-leaning Common Sense Institute shows overall crime in the city of Colorado Springs has fallen almost 10% since 2010, a period of time over which crime rates rose nearly 75% in Denver and rose about 45% statewide. The decrease in crime in the state's second largest city since 2010 coincides with a sharp rise in spending for the city's police department, the report's authors say. They found the Colorado Springs Police Department spent about 73% more per resident in 2022 than in 2010. So interesting. Not they necessarily support all the efforts they're doing in Colorado Springs, but I think it's important to recognize there's some difference between what's happening there and in Denver, and hopefully Colorado Springs can provide a great contrast to the insanity in Denver. So moving on, Denverite.com. Kyle Harris, February 23rd, 2023. No mayoral candidate hits 8% support, and Denver police are more popular than Hancock and City Council, a new poll shows. Plus, about 60% of voters still don't have a pick in the crowded race, and other tidbits from a recent 2023 bipartisan election poll. So I thought this was interesting. Of course, the Denver mayor race is one of the biggest races in this off-year election, as well as Colorado Springs. But I thought it was interesting. There's no obvious frontrunners in this race. Most voters, about 60%, are still unsure who their top pick for mayor is, with ballots going out in a little more than 2 weeks. Homelessness and crime are weighing heavily on likely voters' minds. No surprise there. But pretty interesting to see that there's kind of a lack of leadership in Denver. And even though there's some people who've served in the state legislature, there's not a lot of people who've really captured the hearts or captured the minds of the Denver voters at this point. So pretty interesting. Some opportunity there for the right political entrepreneurs. Looking at another Denverite article, February 23rd, 2023, Kyle Harris as well. Fines are coming soon to Denver landlords who fail to register multi-unit properties. So here we go. Denver city government making it harder for people to rent property in the city. Now, what is this going to do? Fines, registrations, fees. These things are going to drive out Denver landlords, Denver property owners, making the housing shortage even worse. Let's go to the article. Landlords beware. If you haven't secured a license for your multi-unit property, the city of Denver is sending out notices of violations and will soon be waging fines. The landlord licensing program was established to ensure that landlords kept their buildings up to code and in safe and healthy conditions. The registry also allows the city to track how many rental properties are on the market. To date, the city has issued 2822 licenses, and there are approximately 25,000 Multi-unit properties in the city that need to be licensed. Wow. Wow. Fines start at $150, but can go up to $999 if citations are ignored. So really evident that Denver does not want people renting property in the city, and definitely going to make the housing problem worse. Government solutions are really problems. Moving on, Colorado peak politics. Talked a little bit about this last week, but wanted to dive more into it. From February 23rd, 2023, property taxes set to spike 26.5% as state legislature twiddles thumbs. Governor Polis ran on re-election on promises of saving people money, and state lawmakers claim one of their top priorities this session is finding ways to make housing more affordable. And yet, they're about to push homeowners and renters off a financial cliff when an enormous property tax bill of 26.5% comes due next year. Wow. Wow. So yeah, it's going to be absolutely and utterly shocking. Talking about making Colorado less affordable, more expensive. I mean, with rental properties being heavily regulated, rentals being restricted, property taxes going up. I mean, this is not a solution to the housing problem in Colorado. I mean, it's obvious that everything the government is doing, these politicians, these ignorant politicians, are going to make the housing problem worse here in Colorado. Moving on. Jeffco School Spurn Parents Accountability from Jimmy Singenberger, February 26, 2023, from denvergazette.com. When the Jefferson County School Board met on Friday, district leaders obfuscated how a $563 million bond program voters approved in 2018 went over budget by nearly $200 million. 15 months after an expert consulting firm examined the program, identified significant overruns, and offered unheeded recommendations. It's a big deal, and an obvious failure of district leadership. The school board and the Capital Advisory Committee, which is made up of industry professionals charged with overseeing the bond program that will cost nearly $1 billion. This is far from the only scandal demonstrating a complete breakdown of independent oversight and accountability. Only half of Jeffco students can read and write at a grade level, while just 37% meet or exceed expectations in math. By every metric, academic performance is unacceptable. So Jefferson County, like many across the state, are really struggling. Of course, they're getting a lot of money. They've been flush with cash during the whole COVID era. And unfortunately, they're not putting that towards helping the students out. You can guess where some of that money's going, maybe some social programs or administrative fees or costs, administrative pay. But Jeffco is really an example of what's happening across the state. So something to pay attention to. Check that article out, especially if you live in Jefferson County. Get involved in your local school system. Moving on, denvergazette.com, February 27th, 2023. Denver imposes natural gas ban on heating, cooling equipment in commercial buildings and multifamily housing. So here we go. We saw an attack on renting multifamily housing, and here we go, another restriction on multifamily housing. New building codes in Denver will ban natural gas furnaces and water heaters in new commercial and multifamily construction starting in 2024, in a move that officials said demonstrates the city's commitment to reaching zero emissions in 2 decades, but which critics warned would be painful and costly to building owners and tenants. Yeah, they want zero emissions. They're going to have zero people living there. They're going to have zero affordability. They're going to have zero common sense in the city of Denver. And by 2027, natural gas will not be permitted for any heating or cooling equipment in new commercial buildings, the city's building officials said in a news release. Wow. These restrictions do not apply to gas stoves. I mean, if you've ever seen the cost difference between a gas water heater and electric water heater, especially with electric rates going up, it can be astronomical. So we're going to get to a situation in Denver where people renting properties or having commercial property can't afford to heat their water, can't afford to keep their buildings hot in the cold winter months. I mean, absolutely and utterly insane. These are anti-human, anti-civilization, anti-technology policies that the city government's pushing in this total green agenda. Very, very interesting to see how this is going to continue to play out as the government and politicians wage their war against natural gas, the most one of the most concentrated forms of energy on the planet. Well, moving on, last article I wanted to talk about this week is Colorado Sun, and I thought it was interesting to, see the difference between what Colorado Democrats and Colorado Republicans would do if they were in control of the state legislature. So Elliot Wenzer, February 28th, 2023, 10 bills that were doomed in Colorado's Democratic legislature that Republicans introduced anyway. So kind of interesting, seeing some of the Colorado Republicans. There are some liberty leaders down there, some people who are willing to fight for our rights, but we need a lot more of them. Let's look at the bills. Restricting school sports participation based on biological sex. Reduction of state income tax rate. Well, there we go. That would have really made Colorado more affordable by keeping more money in our pockets. Dissuading enforcement of federal firearm laws. We have a great champion of liberty, Ken DeGraff of Colorado Springs. It would have created a civil penalty for enforcing federal laws that are deemed to have infringed on the right to bear arms. I mean, how awesome is that? An abortion ban. Voting systems wireless connections to prevent our voting systems from having wireless connections. Carbon dioxide as a pollutant. So it prohibited the state and local governments from classifying carbon dioxide as a pollutant, which kind of makes sense since that's what people exhale. COVID-19 vaccine requirements for minors. Talked about this one in the past. This bill would have prohibited requiring COVID-19 vaccinations for minors, administering vaccines without guardian consent, and discriminating against unvaccinated minors. Of course, rejected. Immunity for business owners using force. So this would have expanded our Colorado's Make My Day law to your place of business. So that would have been a good one. Of course, limiting caucus and assembly process for primaries was Kirkmeyer and Mary Bradfield. Most Republicans did not support this one, so I don't think that would have passed in a Republican-dominated legislature. And state fees on retail deliveries. I was really surprised to see that this failed. This bill would have repealed a 27-cent state fee on retail deliveries, so would have been good, but of course stopped on party line vote. So there we go. There's some examples of what bills could be introduced. More money in your pocket, less restrictions on our ability to run our businesses, more legal protections for people to defend themselves with a firearm. I mean, that's what Republicans can fight for pretty easily if they're in the majority in the state legislature. And like I said, the election's coming up 2024, so it's time to get involved now. Well, thank you very much for checking out our Free State Colorado weekly roundup today. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.